So when you're triggered, you want to halt, pause, just like Kevin mentioned, do pinball with yourself, and then try to understand why you're triggered rather than overreact.
The next time that you had a little disagreement, you thought to yourself logically, how big of a deal is this really? Like, does this really matter in the grand scheme of things? Is this really a big deal? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, Next Level University Mastermind. Today, for week number 32, as mentioned, we are going to talk about the top 10 ways to resolve conflict in your relationships. So, when Alan and I go on other shows, a lot of the questions we get asked are about relationships because we're so open about ours and our systems and sometimes our downfalls and the things that we've done wrong. So we figured, especially now where, if you're living with your partner or if you're living with your family, you're spending a lot more time with people than maybe you're used to spending time with before. Tara and I moved in together at the beginning of COVID because we didn't want to be without each other. And for us, it's been amazing, but we are pretty good at a lot of these things, and we're always trying to improve. So today we're going to take you through our top 10 ways, and as always, because it is the next level way to have two bonuses.
The only thing I want to add to that is I put a few polls on Instagram about, one of the questions was, who has hurt someone unintentionally that they love? And then who has been hurt unintentionally by someone they love during COVID in particular. 2020 has been a tough year for all of us. We've had to look in a lot of mirrors, again, where there's been a lot of change in a very short amount of time, and sometimes that creates trauma. And we're going to proactively learn how to, create a sustainable system to make sure that your relationships are being built and not destroyed. And I think that's really the pre-frame that I wanted to give everybody. And in those polls, it was above 70% on both, I'm pretty sure, of people who have been hurt and have unintentionally hurt others. I certainly have. And the key is what you do with it. How do you get better?
My goodness. All right. So you guys know I love to use analogies. One of my favorite analogies to use is the pinball analogy. Okay? I have talked about this extensively on our show and on other shows. So a great story for this. And a lot of the stories that I tell are going to be Alan and myself in a moment of resolving conflict, or Taryn and myself. A lot of my stories are very personal, but from my perspective, I think those are the best ones. I could tell you stories about other people, but I don't really know how they went down. I can tell you stories about myself and the people around me because I'm very familiar with what actually happened. Mm-hmm. So, this January,
January 25th, 2020.
So Alan and I co-hosted an event called Top Notch Live in Lowell, Massachusetts. And we did a lot of work, okay? We were doing the podcast, we had clients, we were doing the fitness, we were doing, we had the relationships. We were also putting in this effort to really host an event for the first time ever, booking a venue. Alan did an amazing job at getting speakers, flying in from across the country, Brant Pinvidic, Tori Aletto. We just had a lot of amazing, Mark Metry, a lot of amazing speakers. But it was a lot of stress. Okay, it was a lot of stress. This was one of the hardest 3-4 months of my entire life. Okay, now, after this all happened, Taryn and I did a check-in. And so we rate ourselves and how our relationship is going. And on a scale of 1 to 10 on love and connection, I got a 3. And I always joke about that with Alan. Like, I've gotten a 3, I'm not scared to die. Like, I've gotten a 3 and I survived that. Now, it was extremely painful at the time, okay? And when Taryn said that, my initial reaction was to lose my mind and say, like, you have no idea, and again, this is ego, and we're going to talk about that. You have no idea what I just went through. You have no idea how difficult this was for me, the sleepless nights, the crying, I'm afraid to speak, never mind doing all the technical stuff behind the scenes. And Amy and Tiff were there to help us, which was super helpful. They really helped us out a lot. So my initial reaction was to freak out, and it was to ego up. And there's a reason I call it the pinball analogy. What you need to do is let that thought bounce around your head. Like, let it bounce around from side to side, okay? Don't react, pause. You have to sit there and be patient and pause, because the first thing that you say is very rarely the best thing to say. You have to run it through a filter, Okay, so I want you guys to be thinking about this. Imagine if you got so good at your emotional regulation and your internal dialogue that when somebody said something to you, and Alan's going to talk about triggers next, and you got triggered, you were able to allow those things to bounce around your brain and knock off the dust, knock off the junk, knock off the ego, knock off the argument, knock off the hope that you can escalate things. Like, imagine if that's how good you got. And you can. It takes time, right? It takes time. But what I want you to do is be thinking of this. Anytime you feel like you're going into an argument, you feel like you're triggered, I want you to say pinball. Start playing pinball. And Alan knows, like, I always say this. I'm always trying to do this. And again, I have a lot to work on. I'm definitely far from perfect, but this is something that I'm always working on. So my question for you is, how often have you said the thing that you shouldn't? And you know you shouldn't, and the second it comes out of your mouth, you're like, oh, damn, I should not have said that. I remember I did that with my mom one time. My mom said, if you say another swear, I'm going to put dish soap in your mouth. And then I swore. And right after I did, I was like, I shouldn't have done that. I probably should have let that pinball a little bit around in my brain. And Dawn soap does not taste good.
Wow. The only thing I want to add to that was fire. That was so important. So important. And he's done that with me many times. I've gotten better at this as well. Again, it's a skill. You got to practice it. The only thing I would say about this is make sure you don't suppress. So yeah, pause, but make sure you actually do say the thing. Eventually, not the thing, but whatever your truth is, you don't want to immediately react and like say something that isn't true or is overcorrecting. But you also don't want to not express yourself. So take the time and let the pinball go so that you can find the truth rather than the ego. But make sure you actually do express, otherwise you'll suppress. And I know that that's a challenge a lot of people have. Okay, so number 2 is triggers. So we were on the mic with Tori Leto. That dropped yesterday. And it was an absolutely fire interview. And she talked about triggers. And she said that, she did an Instagram live about this recently too. She said that triggers are an opportunity to learn. And I've really come to learn this in my intimate relationship as well. But what she says is basically that we're all going to get triggered. You've heard me say the quote of, the one thing in life that's guaranteed is emotional pain. What you do with it is not. And so a trigger is some form of an emotional pain that's either past, present, or anticipated fear of the future. And so when you're triggered, it's fight, flight, or freeze. None of those are really that effective in a relationship. You have to, I think freeze is probably the best one. You don't want to run away. You don't want to flight. You also don't want to fight, and we'll get into that soon. But what you want to do is understand, okay, I got triggered. Let me try to figure out why I got triggered. I remember we were driving somewhere, and you got triggered because it reminded you of your old job and your old life.
We were in Florida.
Right, and once he understood why that was happening, the anxiety was less because now he's aware of why it's happening. And I can't even tell you how many times that's happened to me. So when you're triggered, you want to halt, pause, just like Kevin mentioned, do pinball with yourself, and then try to understand why you're triggered rather than overreact or just suppress it and ignore it. And so I want you to ask yourself this. How many relationships have you unintentionally burnt bridges with? And if you did, I want you to go back, forgive yourself, and then ask for forgiveness or say sorry. There's something so beautiful about saying sorry. But imagine what your life could be like if we all have that, like late at night, we're sitting there and we have this memory come up of, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I did that. I have one of those that I talked to Emilia about recently. You can avoid those if you understand your triggers and try to understand yourself. Every time you're triggered, it's an opportunity to learn yourself at a deeper level so that you can start becoming the master of your own conditioning.
Fire?
Here's a question.
Yes. Hammer it.
How important is it to communicate your trigger with someone else because they may not understand where your emotions come from?
Honestly, it's kind of the most important thing because in a way it's a cheat code. In a way you're giving the answers to the test in a way. Like for a couple of reasons. Number one, the person will understand at a deeper level why you reacted the way that you did. Number two, they'll know what things to avoid. Like that's a whole nother thing. But I would say it's like 9 out of 10 important.
Well, I think that first and foremost, to answer that question, you cannot communicate to someone else what your trigger is I guess let's say this. You can only communicate to your partner or to the other person in this relationship, whether it's a friendship, coworker, any type of relationship. You can only communicate your triggers to them to the extent you understand them. And so the key is to understand your own first, then try to communicate to them what that is so that they can work with you rather than against you when that's happening. Because we've all had someone get upset with us and we didn't understand why. But they're playing by a different rule book and they might not even be aware of their rule book. So for me, I grew up in an environment where, debating with raising voice was not uncommon, whereas other people didn't have that. And so me at a decibel level that is completely normal for me, it might be very different for someone who grew up in an environment where you never raise your voice. So you have to understand that about yourself, and you have to communicate how you grew up so that at least now there's a mutual understanding so that there's no, blame game going on in that whole thing.
And the other thing too is like, imagine if you're on a flight and the person next to you is as afraid of planes as you are. You guys are like already connected.
Right.
You're vulnerable with one another. I think it's so important because that's going to be a huge part of your relationship is navigating your triggers. Like your triggers are your triggers, right? You can always work on them, but it's easier to work on them with a partner because at least they'll understand, like, number one, they won't take it as personally because it's not your fault that you said what you said. It's not your fault that their trigger is what it is. But you can either avoid those things or you guys can kind of like support each other better. I think it's so valuable.
Here's a great example as well. Imagine someone who has been cheated on and you're doing something, you're out and about late at night or whatever, and they're scared to be cheated on, so they're in a fearful, triggered state when you did nothing wrong. The thing that's interesting about this is that if you take your past traumas and bring them into your future relationship, they'll actually sabotage your future relationship. So you have to be at least aware of them. And like Kevin said, it's almost like a trigger once you understand it and communicate it with each other with empathy. It's actually going to bring you closer rather than apart. Emilia and I have a label we call wedge. Anytime there's anything where we feel like we're diverging rather than converging, we say wedge. And that means, okay, there's something between us, let's dig. Let's figure out what's going on. And usually it's a goal in conflict, value in conflict, or belief in conflict, or some sort of past trauma that's like manifesting in this weird way. And we'll get into that. But I wanted to make sure we talk about that to answer that question.
And I also want to make sure we give credit. So Alan and I are both in amazing relationships, which makes it a lot easier for us to learn these things because we have a safe space. And so number 3, you have a great girlfriend or partner, depending on what your situation is, when he or she comes home and says, hey, I was listening to a relationship podcast today, and they talked all about kicking the can. Okay, so we're going to talk about kicking the can. Taryn gave me this idea, and she actually messaged me a bunch of ideas today, so I want to give her all the due credit on this. I think she was listening to a show where they interviewed celebrities to figure out how they kept their relationships fresh. Okay, and let me tell you a story before I go into the lesson and what that means. So recently, Taryn was in the kitchen, and I heard her scream twice. And I was like, hey, are you all right? And she's like, yeah, the hose on the sink got caught. And I was like, okay, like, you're good, though? And she's like, yeah, I'm good. So naturally, I don't know if this is a guy thing, but my natural reaction is like, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to fix that now. So I went into the kitchen, I turned it on and started playing with it. And I think she got a little triggered by that because I think she didn't believe that I thought it was broken. But in my mind, when something is broken, I want to fix it. Like, that's just the way I work. Okay, so here I am spraying it, and I was like, you said this was broken, right? And she said, yeah. And I said, it's not stuck. I don't know what you were saying. And I just said, explain to me what happened. So her and I both kind of got a little bit heated, okay, because the communication definitely wasn't there. I think I probably came off a little bit above her by saying it that way. Like, I don't think it was broken. It's not broken now, right? Even though in my tone, you can see that I'm kind of being negative, okay? So kick the can means this. You take your problem, and if it's not going to be a problem in a week, you kick it. Kick the can. Kick it into an alley and forget about it. All right? Don't allow minor things to become major. And so many people do this. And again, if you guys can take all of these things and start practicing a little bit at a time, all of these are connected, and Alan and myself are always trying to do these things. Okay? So these are all connected. So number 1, don't allow your minor things to become major things. That is super important. And think on a logical basis. Okay, imagine if the next time that you had a little disagreement, you thought to yourself logically, how big of a deal is this really? Like, does this really matter in the grand scheme of things? Is this really a big deal? I think Taryn and I did a great job of that. And I apologize. I said, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to, not believe you. I was just trying to fix it, and I didn't see an issue. Okay, so my question for you is this. Will this matter next week? Will this matter? Is this that big of a deal where you guys should really be arguing over it? Or is this something you can literally laugh about and say, you know what, this isn't going to matter in a week. Let's not worry about it. And again, Taryn gave me that idea, and I think she saw that or heard that on another podcast, so I can't take credit for it.
I remember when I heard Tony Robbins say, it's like one day we'll look back on this and laugh, and he said, why wait? And I think that, I remember I was at a wedding with Emilia early in our relationship, and we met this couple who had been married for, I think, 45 years. And they do that thing where it's like if you've been married 5 years, 10 years, it's like come to the dance floor, and then everybody leaves the dance floor as you get up and up and up the echelon there. And this couple, we had a good time with them all night, danced all night with them, and we ended up asking them, Emilia was actually asking her, this man's wife, what they did differently. How did they stay so happily in love? Because they seemed so clearly happy for 45 years, and she's always trying to learn, and she loves this arena in terms of relationships. That's her thing. And she asked, and basically our motto of our relationship came out of that conversation. And this woman, she basically said, I wish for you both everything that matters and nothing that doesn't. And from that moment on, our relationship has been around this idea of essentialism. In other words, if it is a big deal or might become a big deal, let's deal with it now. And if it's not, let's not worry so much about the little stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff, unless the small stuff can, under the surface, grow into big stuff, and that's the other thing we'll talk about here. Okay, number 4. This is another shout-out to my beautiful girlfriend. So I remember I was outside on the back porch. It was summer. We were talking to her little sister, and I remember somehow relationships came up, and somehow fighting came up. And we weren't fighting. We were just talking, but she said, Alan, I'm never going to fight with you. And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, well, I want to be with you forever. You want to be with me forever. We're never going to fight. Like, in my consciousness growing up in the way that I grew up, it was like that felt impossible to me, to be completely honest, and I won't go into why. But she was like, well, here's why. I think the label of a fight implies that there's a winner. And when you fight, nobody wins. And from that moment on, I was like, whoa, mind blown. And I now not only don't fight in friendships and beyond that, but I've been with Emilia now for going on 13 months, and we have never once raised our voice to each other. We've never once fought. There's a big difference between fighting to be right versus having a conversation to understand. Now, we've had our challenging moments, but they were conversations, trying to understand one another, not trying to be right. When she's trying to understand me and my triggers, and I'm trying to understand her and her triggers, there is no fighting. It's just digging. And digging gets messy, but you're on a team. As a matter of fact, we don't even break physical space. Like, she usually holds me, even though sometimes I, need space, and we stay in physical rapport. And so what I want you to ask yourself is, how many times did you fight or debate or argue to be right rather than to understand the other person? And that's a rolling theme you'll see throughout all these lessons. It's like, if you're trying to be right, you will not win in relationships. And unfortunately, this is, in my opinion, why most business leaders, not most business leaders, I'll say this, people who are very, very mathematically brained, who believe in like a right answer, because in math there is like a right answer to an equation, they kind of jeff relationships a little bit, because I think they still have that need to be right. I know I'm, as an electrical and computer engineer, like, I was wired in a way where there was a right answer. And I now understand that in a relationship, there's two perspectives no matter what. And feelings are not right and wrong. They're just what they are. And truth is a perspective. So that's the frame.
I think another important thing is, and Alan alluded to this, when you're in a relationship, you already have a shared intention. Whatever that is, whether it's growth, whether it's learning about each other, whatever it is, you have to understand that, like, if you are fighting, you're actually taking away from the intention. And you're doing both of you a disservice. Okay? So a lot of this is stuff that you want to communicate with your partner. Because you can be the best communicator in the world. You can be the most patient when it comes to pinball, knowing your triggers, doing all that stuff. But if you're in a relationship with someone who isn't receptive, it's going to be a lot harder to succeed. Now, it's not impossible, but you're going to have to do some work in terms of allowing them to do the work. You can't do the work for them, right? You can show them, you can lead them to it, you can show them how awesome it is to know it, but at the end of the day, the other person has to want it as bad as you, and that's really the only way that it's going to work out. Unfortunately, I mean, that can be painful sometimes, but it's important to state. So, number 5. In my opinion, the only way to come to the middle of a situation is to agree. You have to start with agreement. Okay, this is like one of the first rules in sales. Always start with agreement. Okay, so if I'm talking to Alan, he says, yeah, that's pretty expensive. You're right, Alan, it is pretty expensive. But for that expensive price, you get all these things, and nobody can compare to that. Okay, if I disagree, then I make Alan wrong. Just like in any relationship. Okay, so you guys know Mondays for us is Marathon Monday. I'm in the studio from pretty much 9 a.m. until 8 p.m. sometimes. And Taryn just wants to know when I'm leaving so she can make sure that I get home safe, okay? Just a little text before I leave. Not that difficult. But lately, I haven't been doing a great job, okay? So recently, I was literally getting ready to leave. I texted her and said, hey, babe, I'm leaving. I'll be home in a half hour. And then Alan and I got into a deep conversation. And it was stuff that needed to get talked about. It was personal stuff between the two of us and just stuff that needed to get talked about. It was nothing bad, but it was just an awareness and uncovering and digging, okay? And I ended up getting home like an hour after I said I was going to get home, and I didn't text Taryn, I didn't tell her, okay? And when I got home, she said that. She said, well, I wish you would have texted me and told me when you were leaving, just so I knew you were safe. Like, I thought you were coming home, and it's been an hour and a half. I was really worried about you. Now, again, going back to pinball, okay? Also, understanding her triggers. That's another thing, like understanding where that actually fits in with her fears. But for me, it was going to pinball and saying, okay, is she actually right about this? Right? Like, she has these feelings. Are these feelings correct? And for me, I had to admit that she was right and I was wrong. Like, I wasn't worried about it, but I'm not the one who was at home waiting for me, right? I was the one here present. So for me, I had to admit, yeah, you know what? She is correct. She is correct. And I had to drop my ego and admit that I was wrong. Okay? Now, if that went the opposite way, and I said like, oh, you're paranoid. Like, you're paranoid. You don't have to worry about me. And I do say that. I do say, like, you don't have to worry about me, babe. I'm a big, strong man. But again, that doesn't matter. That's not what it's about. So if I said, like, babe, you're paranoid. Like, you have to stop worrying about me. You have to give me space. You have to do this. You have to do this. It would not have went well. Because at the end of the day, she was correct. Okay? So imagine if you had the ability to be secure enough in yourself and understand that this is going to pay dividends in your relationship for you to drop the ego and take the responsibility for your actions or lack thereof. This is a complete game changer. Now, again, some of this is reliant upon your partner not rubbing it in your face, being a good communicator, being humble when they're right. Okay? That's going to be a caveat with a lot of these things. But imagine if you could do that. How often are you arguing because you don't want to be wrong? Like, and you know you're wrong. How many of you have had those arguments where it's like, and I know I do it, because I start using random stuff. Like, yeah, you know what, Alan? You left the towel on the floor, man.
Right.
And it's like, what am I doing?
We're talking about finances.
Yeah. And I've done that. And I've literally said, like...
You didn't even read the book.
Yeah, right. That's how I know I'm just afraid to be wrong, is I start trying to make other people wrong for things that aren't even related. Okay? That is one of the most important ones, I think, is just agree and admit when you're wrong, because if you don't, you're just delaying the inevitable anyway. You're just delaying pain.
I want to add something here because I talked to Kevin not long ago. We got a question come through. I love it.
Questions? So
I talked to Kevin not long ago about, we're business partners, right? So I basically said this to him. I said, Kev, I'm never 100% right about anything because there is no 100% right. First of all, there is no right and wrong. There's a lot of gray. There's more correct for a given circumstance. This comes down to the Aristotle thing that I've said many times. It's like, well, that person always does the right thing. And it's like, what does that even mean? Do you do the right thing for the right reason, in the right way, in the right amount, at the right time, with the right people? right and wrong is not the right way to think of it. And so what I want to say, Kevin is absolutely on point with everything he just said. But remember, he told Taryn he'd text her.
Right.
If he didn't say that and make that promise, and here's the other thing, he could have easily used that as an opportunity to say, you're absolutely right, I said I would do it and I didn't. That's on me. He takes responsibility and ownership. But honestly, in the future, can we adjust to that? And so I just want to reiterate that right and wrong is probably the wrong frame, even though I know exactly what he's talking about. It's a percentage. It's a mutual understanding. Emilia and I have a thing called we create our own rule book. And Kevin and I do this. Us on the team, we do this. We're not going to do something because other people think we should. We're going to do something because we believe it's what's best for everybody. And when he mentioned right and wrong, he means based on the rule book they created together, not based on what a sitcom does or doesn't do and all that. And I just want to make sure we talked about that.
That's a great point. Great point.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Okay, so was the question come through, Amy?
Yeah, somebody was just asking what the name of that podcast was that Kevin mentioned.
Let me text
Taryn sent.
my love. Or Taryn, can you put it in the chat if she's in here? I think she's in here.
Yes, she's in here.
I'll turn the fan on. Okay, it's gonna warm in here.
Sounds good, man. All right, yeah, it is warm.
Wait, hold on, we have a question.
Oh, we got a question come through. No fan.
Sweat to death. Go ahead.
How early on in your relationship did you do these things?
Interesting. Honestly, I think the goal is to be able to do these things from the very beginning. I don't necessarily think I was, I won't say developed enough, but again, part of it is going to depend on who your partner is. Like a lot of these things, the next two things I'm going to talk about, Taryn taught me. So I think it's a difficult question for me personally to answer because Taryn is very good at these things and she's learned these things and these are a focus of hers. But I would say as soon as possible because if the person that you're dating or talking to knows how serious you are about this and about the relationship, I think that can only be positive. Some people might say like, oh, you're going to scare people away. Honestly, if you scare them away, they're probably not the right people anyway. That's what I would say. I'm going to turn the fan on.
Sounds good. Amy, just so I hit the heart of the question, can you repeat it one more time, please?
Yeah. How early on in your relationship did you do these things?
So, again, similar to what Kevin said, I owe most of my acumen in this arena to Emilia and to the mistakes I've made in the past. And so, one of the things that Jim Rohn says that I think is really powerful is there's nothing more frustrating than trying to have an extraordinary life while not trying to be an extraordinary person. And so, I think that's the same for relationships. You know, we call it the we. So Emilia and I, there's Emilia, there's me, and we have the we. And the we is a relationship that we have. I made a few promises to her out of the gate, which were really promises to myself. Number one, I will always help your light shine as much as possible. I want to amplify the good in you as much as I possibly can, regardless of myself, as long as it's in alignment with who I aspire to be. That was the caveat. Number two, I will always protect your heart to the very best of my ability. And I think that those promises and my dedication to do this right is what has forced me to learn the rest of this. So in those trigger moments when I'm freaking out because of something that's happened in my past or some trigger, and I don't raise my voice, that's my dedication to protecting her heart is so high because from the very beginning of our relationship, I told her, this is the one I'm going to do right. I have to do this right. If I do nothing else successful in my life, this is what I want to do successfully. And from that moment on, I just was willing to learn anything and everything that I could. I've learned so much from Taryn, some of the stuff that we're going through. You know, Taryn texted me one of these things about bids that Kevin's going to talk about. So I think it's a matter of improving along the way. If you want your relationship to improve, you have to improve, period. And this is kind of how you do it. So hopefully that answers your question. But the answer is right out of the gate, but understand that making mistakes is proof that you're trying. You know, if you don't have a relationship that you've never raised your voice or anything, trust me, I've been there. You're not hopeless. It's not hopeless. You can start from where you are, you can level set, and you can build. And that's what this is about, being perfect is not a thing. I think improving and bettering your best is the thing.
Did you see me break my face with the headphones? I cracked my face. It hurt me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, terribly. That's great.
Well, you're still looking good.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. You're up.
I'm up.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 6, 27 minutes. Okay. Have a system. So Emilia and I have started doing relationship talks every weekend, every Saturday. Thank you again, Amy, for helping us with that. And what we've noticed in these relationship talks is, and some of the people that we've done them with are married couples who have been together far longer than us. And a lot of this I, again, attribute to her because this is definitely her genius zone, relationships in general. But we were on the phone this past Saturday with someone who is just amazing. And she's been married for, I believe, 7 years. And she had actually heard the Mastermind where Taryn and Emilia ran the show and talked about how to improve an intimate relationship, how to improve relationships with yourself, with other people. And in that, I believe Taryn and Kevin talked about their check-in, how it's daily and how they ask questions to each other every night. I don't know if you guys are still doing that.
We've kind of been jeffing a little bit, but I think for us it's like we're at the stage now where we can kind of be a little bit more reactive of like, hey, I didn't feel like this got met today.
Right.
So there's a constant check-in.
Emilia and I as well, so we have a weekly check-in, but we've actually evolved it too. I remember Emilia and I were in the shower one time, and she had basically said, like, I don't feel like we need it to be weekly anymore. I feel like our communication is so next level that it can be bi-weekly. I think she said monthly, and then I was like, I think I'd rather do bi-weekly because I'm probably more fear-based in this arena. I want to stay humble. But it evolves. The point is this person we were on the phone with basically took their questions at face value and used them in their marriage. And what Emilia and I realized on this call is that Taryn and Kevin have their own love languages. They have their own relationship. And those questions they customized for each other, not only based on each other's uniqueness and their relationship uniqueness, but also on that part of evolution in their relationship, right? And so, my point here in the lesson is everything is customized. And so Emilia and I created this big PDF about our check-in, but it's all customizable. And the last thing you want to do is just blanketly use, that's not a word, blanketly.
It is. It's a word.
Okay,
it's a word
cool.
now.
Thank you, brother.
Love it.
Is just use the questions we use. Instead, you want to figure out which questions to use and which things to check in on to get to the root of what might be going underneath the surface of your relationship. And so what I want you to ask yourself is, what would your relationship be like? What would your friendships be like? What would your business relationships be like if you had a system? I think the key is consistency. And the key is to have some form of customized check-in with each type of relationship. Kevin and I's check-in is going to be very different than Emilia's and I's. And I think that it always needs to be customized. So do you have a check-in with your friends, family, business partners, intimate relationship of any kind? And if so, is it customized to the uniqueness of that relationship, not just of each person in it, but also the stage of that relationship?
It's super important, too, to understand. Oh, no, I think I lost it. Hold on. It'll come back.
We'll hold space.
It'll come back. It didn't come back.
Okay.
It's gone. It's gone.
It's gone for good.
It's gone. Oh, yeah, no. I got it. It's back. It's come back. The best system, especially to start, is one that you'll stick to. Okay, so if we use fitness as an example, I don't really care what you do at the beginning as long as it's something sustainable that you'll stick to, right? The best system, the best diet, the best exercise regimen, the best relationship check-in, whatever, at the beginning, the best way to save money is the system that you'll stick to. Whatever is sustainable from the get, and then you can evolve, hashtag better your best, as Alan would say.
I love that hashtag. Wow.
I appreciate that. What's 7 in Spanish? Siete?
Yeah.
Número siete.
I believe so.
Pretty good. So what are you actually doing when you're listening? What are your intentions when you're listening? Okay? Number 7 is listen to learn. Not to be right, not to rebuke. Is that a word?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's great. My vocab's coming way up.
Yeah.
So another story about...
Blanketly.
Another story about Kevin jeffing things. So Alan and I had the amazing opportunity to go to Brendon Burchard's Influencer Academy in 2019. Right? Jeez, that was so long ago, it feels like. And at this point, Taryn and I weren't like new, but knew enough where I was kind of used to being single, and I was used to just kind of doing what I wanted, and I wasn't necessarily a great communicator. So we were sitting on the couch, and I remember telling her,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, you remember this.
Yeah.
I remember telling her excitedly, like, hey, we're going to Brendon Burchard's event. I think we got free tickets.
Yeah.
We got free tickets. We're going to Brendon Burchard's event. And she's like, oh, you didn't, like, tell me? Like, this was kind of, like, 3 or 4 days in advance. And this was a week. Like, we were going away for a week. And I just kind of, like, didn't think of it. I don't know why. I just think I was so excited and I thought the sky was the limit. And honestly, I think I had a little ego at the time of look at how good I am and the things and the opportunities that we have, right? But as she's telling me this, again, first thing, pinball. Like, don't say anything stupid, Kev. Don't say anything stupid, okay? I'm listening to learn. Why is she upset about this? Is she upset that I'm going across the country to chase my dreams? No, not even a little bit. She's not even upset. I think she's frustrated that my communication isn't what I have touted it as, right? One of my strengths is my communication, and here I am just planning weekly trips without telling my girlfriend. Alan knows, right? And all the podcast listeners know, but I never mentioned it to my girlfriend. Not great. Not ideal, okay? So I learned very quickly a couple things. Number one, for a lot of people, feels are real, okay? People's feelings are real. Even if it's not your intention. It wasn't my intention to make her feel left out, right? It wasn't my intention. It just slipped my mind to even say it because there was so much going on. And that's something I had to go back and agree on and admit I could have done better in that situation. But understand that. Understand that when you're listening, it shouldn't be to have a rebuttal. It should be to learn. I want to understand what this break in rapport is. I want to understand what I did to make you feel that way. Right? I'm trying to learn. We're on the same team. Okay? So feels are real. Do not worry about... Imagine if you get to the point where you don't have to worry about your response. You don't have to worry about trying to be right. You could literally sit there in a safe place knowing that your partner is communicating their truth, and you can think to yourself, okay, what am I actually going to learn here? I'm going to learn about my partner. What is the actual truth of this? Rather than trying to be right. Again, that is a giant theme here, but I think it's where a lot of people tend to go wrong there. So, my question, during a talk, during maybe what seems like a disagreement or an argument, what are you listening to? And what are you thinking while you're listening? Are you thinking, oh my God, this is crazy. I can't believe we're doing this again, right? Are you thinking that? Because you're already shut off and you're not going to take anything away from that. And you're not going to come to a conclusion or, resolute. Is that a word?
Resolution.
Yeah, cool. Conflict. So that's my question. What are you thinking about during these arguments or these breaks in rapports or these disagreements, we'll call them?
I had two things come up for me during this while Kevin was talking because I was intently listening. I think number one is that we have this fear that we're not going to have an intelligent response. And so you're constantly thinking about what you're going to say next instead of listening. It wasn't long ago I was in the kitchen at Emilia's place and we were spending quality time with her family. And I was connecting with them while trying to help her prepare food, while trying to track my macros, and I did all three pretty poorly. And for me, I really, really, really dislike doing anything without excellence. I'm very much like, for me, doing one thing really well fulfills me. Doing three things poorly, it makes me very upset and frustrated. And I guess the lesson there is multitasking is not a thing. Even earlier today, I was doing a post, the clip I posted on Instagram today with Tori Leto. Kevin was doing an audio message for a potential client while I was trying to do the post. And I would listen to him, then go back to the post, then listen to him. And I wasn't supporting him. I wasn't doing well on the post. I just was like, this is terrible. I need to just pick one and one thing at a time. So number one, if you're afraid to not have a response, you're going to inherently interrupt people. I know I've been guilty of that. And try to just listen and be okay with letting your intuition come up with something. And if you jeff it, you jeff it. You don't necessarily have to add value. One thing Kevin taught me early on was that listening is adding value. And I think that's something that
should have been. That's bonus number 7.
Bonus number 7. Bonus.
In worst case scenario, you don't. Did I interrupt you?
No, you're good.
In worst case scenario, you don't have something to say. Like this, a lot of these things, like, get it out of your mind that this has to be like the Notebook picture perfect. It doesn't, and it's not going to. It's not going to. If you have to take a minute and just say, I need to think for a second. Cool. It's better to do that than to blurt something out, right? Like, get over the fact that this has to be perfect. Alan already said that, but like, it might not be pretty, but nothing is at the beginning. Nothing is. Like, you guys are working on something. You're figuring each other out. Maybe you're in a high stress situation. Maybe one of you is triggered, right? Like, there's a lot of emotions going on. It's not going to look pretty, and that's okay. That's okay. That shouldn't be the expectation.
And if
You had a question come through.
Sure.
Love it.
Okay.
Proud
Were
of you, Amy,
Taryn
for
and
the question.
Amelia both already into their own personal development, or was there a discussion where you had to turn them onto the idea of personal development, both as a couple or individually?
That's a
That's an
simple
easy
one.
one,
Yeah,
yeah.
Taryn has way more books than I have. She is honestly way better at this than I am. Like Taryn she was into personal development before I was. That's the easiest way to say it.
On our first date, I was talking about triggers, and we were eating sushi, and we had went axe throwing earlier that day, and it was the best first date I've ever been on. She said the same thing, and I remember talking about what happens to me when I'm triggered and how I'm trying to emotionally regulate, and I remember her asking me, "What do you need from me when you're triggered?" And I was like, "What? You're asking me what?" I actually thought I misheard her, and I was like about to answer like what I can do for her when I'm triggered. And I remember being like, wait, did you say what can you do for me when I'm triggered? That was like foreign to me. And granted, I've been in some relationships where that was not the focus. When I'm triggered, it's still about the other person. And with her, it was just the short answer is, I mean, I went into her bedroom and there's Aristotle books. Like, she's more into personal development than anyone I've ever met in my life. That was before me.
And there's a follow-up. What do you do if your partner is not?
Ooh. Oh boy. So
there.
this is something that I've talked about a lot. And again, this is one of those things like there's only so much you can do. Okay. There's a couple things. You can communicate how important it is to you because this could be a shared value or a shared belief or a shared behavior, right? You could communicate, hey, I know you've never really, been into this sort of stuff, but it's important to me that we're learning and growing as a couple, that we're always bettering ourselves. And then again, you can tie in for our family, for our future family, right? For whatever it is. But at the end of the day, and this is like a hard truth, and I'm interested to see where you go with it, but you can't force somebody to be something that they're not. It's just, I've seen people try, whether it's fitness, whether it's personal development, whether it's all sorts of things. And at the end of the day, the person has to want it or at least be open to it. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I always say show people how cool it is to do it, right? Like bring them to a mastermind like this. I know some people in here that have done that, right? We have people in this mastermind who have brought their significant others. I can't see who's in here, so there might be people in it right now, but that's one way. But you can't make like an ultimatum of, look, do this or it's done. Anytime you're threatening that, you're in trouble. I think you can lead them to it and support them in it.
I agree with you. That's where I'm going to go is we've all heard the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Haas.
But what if you drink water in front of the horse and show the horse how delicious water is? So I was on the phone with a client this past weekend, and he's running a business, and I basically use this simple analogy that I think is so powerful. Imagine you're at a trade show, and everyone's there to look at cool, awesome stuff. Just honestly to see cool shit. I'm just gonna say it. Okay.
Cool shit.
You don't say, "Hey, come over to my booth," and then make people feel guilty when they don't. Hey, come over here. You don't throw flyers in their face, get in people's space. You just do cool shit at your booth. So understand your partner's value. What they value rather. What do they value? Do they value nice cars? Do they value money? Do they value fitness? Use what they want as an opportunity to show them what they need. Like, and I'll give you a simple example. If you like nice cars, I can show you a nice car. I might actually buy a nice car, not because I care about it, but because I want to be able to influence someone in a positive way who loves cars. So if I had a Mercedes-Benz that Kevin wants, his dream car, and I roll up in it, he's going to be like, yo, man, and he's going to have a conversation about a car. And I'm going to pepper in financial mastery. Now all of a sudden he's like, oh, Unshakable, Tony Robbins, like ETFs, index funds, all this. He's going to be excited. How'd you get that car? Financial mastery. How'd you get that car? Stock market, right? So you have to have the results they believe they want so that you fit into their reticular activating system. Yes, Amy, I said it. That way they come to you. Last thing I'll say on this. We think that we have to shoot at a target. What if you were a target that draws the right arrows? The law of attraction is becoming what others want so that you don't have to go chase all the time.
Might be the best answer you've ever given.
Oh, thank you,
That
man.
was a good one.
Wow.
It's
Thanks,
funny because behind the scenes, Alan used 2 of those analogies or those examples today, and I think that's one of the first times he's ever used them live. So I get to see things that you don't.
Thanks, man. Okay, so number 8. We have 12 minutes, so we got
we're
to
gonna
hammer.
We're gonna hammer. We got this.
All right, so this is, yes, my secret sauce.
Secret sauce.
All right.
Expert tip.
So I'm realizing now, huge shout out to my girlfriend. I don't know if she's on this. Sweetheart, if you're listening, I learned so much from you. Okay, this is her secret sauce too. I'm going to speak to her. So I've never seen someone so sought after in my life. So many people want to be around this woman, including me. And I think I understand why. And I don't know if it's a gift that everybody has worked on developing as much as she has. And I do believe that I've worked on developing this as well. And she is so focused on unconditional love. She is so focused on others and adding value unconditionally. You've heard me say before, the key is to have someone else's best interest at heart, regardless of yourself. I remember when Kevin asked me, like, do you mind if I work with this client of yours? He might leave you if he comes over to me. Dude, if it's best for him, that's all I care about. And there's something about wanting someone else's goals, wanting them to be in alignment with themselves, regardless of yourself. If we fit, that's great. If it's a win-win, that's great. If it's not, that's okay. So many people grew up in an environment where there was conditional love, aka you must be, think, do, say, believe what I think, say, and believe you should. And when you have this secret sauce, when you really, genuinely, sincerely, wholeheartedly, abundantly want them to be them and value them for it, even if you disagree about it, because you believe in the power of choice, you will be the most sought-after person in the world. I taught Amy this lesson not long ago, probably a year ago now, and she is so focused on adding value, and I told her, Amy, if you keep that up, you will never lose opportunities. People are going to want to be around you, people are going to seek you out, and then you're going to have to be, your biggest challenge is not going to be being lonely, it's going to be, how do I focus on me? How do I deal with this? Right? All this attention. So needing external validation is a scarce place to live, and people can feel it. Instead, try to live from abundance. Try to be so okay with yourself that you want what's best for others, even if it's not what's best for you in that moment or what it triggers a fear. Trade your expectation in for appreciation, and your whole life will become a miracle. My girlfriend is so unbelievably good at this. Dating me is not easy. I have huge goals, dreams. I'm all over the place. She just lets me be me and wants me to be me. And I want that for her, and that's why we're sought after, and we're very blessed. But that is the best one on here, in my opinion. If you can master that art, I'm telling you, you'll never be lonely again.
I have big shoes to follow now, don't I? I might just stall out here for the last 9 minutes. So number 9, small bids add up to giant results. So what does that mean, as Alan would say? What does that mean? What does that mean? So this is, Taryn taught me this. So Taryn has been studying relationships for a long time. Dr. John Gottman is a relationship expert. So he has done a ton of research on relationships and partnerships and how people react and how they communicate. So we're talking about bids here. What a bid is kind of like an experience. Okay, so if I reach out to Alan and put my hand on his shoulder like this, and he looks at me and like smiles, that's a positive bid. Okay, a great example of this is Taryn and I. If we're having an argument, I always make sure, I don't want to say argument because we don't really argue, a disagreement, I always make sure we're holding hands, and if she pulls away, that's a negative bid. And I notice that. She might not even notice she's doing it. Okay, for me, I might look away. That's a negative bid. Okay, that's negative. A negative bid. Positive bid is something good. Just think of it that way. Positive experience versus negative experience. So Dr. John Gottman studied relationships. He studied couples. And he said that the successful couples have a 5-to-1 positive to negative bid ratio. Okay, so for every 5 positives, you can have 1 negative. We're aiming for much higher numbers, 20-to-1, 100-to-1. Like we're aiming for high numbers, but to get started, 5-to-1 is a great place to start. And John Gottman got to the point where within 15 minutes of seeing a couple, he could predict with 90% accuracy whether or not they would stay together in the long run. because of things like this, okay? A little information can tell you a lot about a couple. It can tell you a lot about a person. So if you can make positivity a habit, and this is a conscious thing, okay? This is a conscious thing where you're thinking, for me, I'm consciously thinking, if Taryn moves her hand, I want to bring it back. I want to get reconnected. I want to turn this into a positive bid. Okay, that's always on my mind. When I stop and get flowers on a Tuesday, that's because I want a positive bid. I want her to know I love her. I want her to feel loved. Okay, our ratio is way higher than 5-1. And honestly, it's so important to keep trying to better your best. 5-1 is great, but aim for higher. Because 1 can kind of derail the whole thing. Mm-hmm. If it's a really bad negative bid, that can kind of get rid of a lot of the progress that you feel you've made. So always keep this in mind. So imagine if you were aware of your energy, of the bids that you were giving the other person. Again, going to the pinball, going to kicking the can, agreeing, admitting, listening and learning. You can literally have positive bids throughout these, or you can have negative bids throughout these. So what is your energy saying about you? And are you consciously, trying to do positive bids?
Every one of these line items is how to create more positive bids out of challenges.
Tough one.
That's
a tough one because I don't know the science well.
So I also want everyone to understand that if you're at a 100-1 ratio and you have 1 negative bid, in order to get back to 101, 100-1, you need another 100 positives. So it's very difficult to maintain a ratio that's above 5-1, 20-1, 100-1. And as my math brain is there, here's another thing that I want to make sure I say, and we got to go, so I'll go super fast. All right. Sometimes you have to take a negative bid to eliminate a bunch of negatives in the future. So, for example, when we get out of the shower, either if I'm alone or together, I take the bath mat and put it back because that's a closed energetic loop. I remember I had to have one challenging conversation about that in a check-in, which was a negative bid, but that way there's no resentment, there's no negative bids all along the way. So use one negative bid to solve thousands of negative bids in the future. Granted, I forget sometimes, but that's an important thing to notice. Okay, number 10, truth is a perspective. Again, this goes back to the simple fundamental of wanting to be right. There is no right or wrong. There is someone else's truth. Focus equals feelings. Kevin already said that. If someone is feeling hurt, you cannot make that wrong. It's what they're feeling. It's their truth. I use the analogy of Kevin and I both go to a party. It's an awesome party, so awesome. I leave and I thought it was the best ever. Everybody was having fun. I met so many people, awesome. Kevin got elbowed in the face with the one fight in a back room that broke out. So he leaves saying that party sucked. That was horrible, worst night ever. I got a flat tire. Okay, we both went to the same party. I didn't know there was a fight that broke out. So my truth is that was a great, awesome party, positive for everyone, positive bids all around. Kevin spends the rest of his life saying that party sucked. I just got a bloody nose.
If you guys know me, you know I'd actually love that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, hell yeah.
Bad analogy with Kevin.
No, it's good.
But that's my point. Do not try to make someone else's truth wrong. That is the worst idea ever. Nobody wins when you do that. Imagine if you were only trying to understand their perspective. We call this Drive to 5. We do this on the team. If there's 5 of us and there's a flagpole in the middle, I want to understand what everyone sees so that we can come together, not apart.
Oh, fire. Oh, shout out to the powerful Brene Brown for bonus number 1, The Story I Am Telling Myself. So Taryn and I watched her documentary on Netflix. Super powerful. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it. So she basically goes into any difficult conversation and leads with the story I am telling myself. That automatically shows you that, look, I might not be right. This might be completely wild, but this is the story I'm telling myself. The story I'm telling myself is you were flirting with that person. The story I'm telling myself is you don't care about my feelings, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can see where that goes. Alan was late to meet me for the first speech I ever gave. Confident Women's Consortium. Shout out to Joyce Strong. He was late, okay? And he literally texted me. He was like, hey, man, I'll just meet you there. No biggie. And I was like, that's absolutely a big deal because you have all the equipment and I need the equipment. So I told Alan, the story I'm telling myself is this is always going to be a running theme. We're going to be Brendan Burchard level and I'm going to be waiting on Jeff to powder his nose in the hotel room. And it's going to be like, yo, what is up with this? So I said, and again, this lowers the intimidation. The story I'm telling myself is that you don't value this as much as I do, right? Or you're not as prepared as I am. Or you're not going to take this seriously when we really need to take this seriously, okay? It admits off the cuff that this is just a story that I'm telling myself. There might not be any truth in this. Maybe you got a flat tire, but this is the story I am telling myself. So next time you are having a hard talk, imagine if you could do this. You could go to your partner, you could go to your business partner, your parents, and say, hey, the story I'm telling myself is that you don't value my time. You don't value my feelings, right? You think this is funny, but it's not. I feel like you're bullying me. Completely different story. And that's it for that one.
I had something that was so important.
You can do it.
All right.
No, you can do it.
I know, but I can't think of it.
Husa.
We're going to move to the next one, and maybe it'll come to me. All right. This is a bonus. Find the root. Bonus number 2. So most of my stories are about Emilia. So Emilia and I are getting groceries at the store on our way to the lake house. And I parked in like the back of the parking lot, and it was getting dark. And I remember her asking me like, why did you park there? And I was like, oh, I just don't like parking near people. I think it's a habit because usually when I park at the gym, I want to listen to an audiobook and I don't want any distractions in my periffs. I don't like anything to lose my focus. I'm a weirdo. Periffs. Okay, but she doesn't like to park in the back of parking lots. I'm a 6'2" man. I'm not necessarily concerned with, being attacked as much as a female. And I've never seen that perspective of like you actually have to be concerned with where you park as a female. Any female in here probably understands that. Not that you shouldn't as a male either, but it's not something that was on my radar. And so you have to find the root. Every single challenge in an intimate relationship, before we go here, it's going to come down to one of 3 things. I'm so convinced of this, and I actually talked to Tori about this as well, so and Emilia, and I've gotten a lot of confirmation here. I believe it's a goal in conflict, a value in conflict, core value, or a belief in conflict. Imagine you're in a car with someone. You're going to the same place, and you believe in the same route, but you're listening to music the other person hates. That's a value in conflict. Now imagine you're listening to the music that both people love and the route is good, but you have no idea where you're headed. You're just wandering. Goal in conflict. Or one person wants to go here, the other person wants to go here. And that's what happened with Emilia and I in where we parked. Okay, now imagine you're going to the same place and you're listening to music you love in the car, but you have a different belief on which route to take. Why are you taking a right turn there? There's a better way. We've all been there. So every issue in a relationship, friends, family, intimate, it's always going to come down to one of those 3, and you cannot solve the disease if you have the wrong diagnosis. You have to diagnose, is this a goal in conflict, a value in conflict, a belief in conflict, or all 3? And let's get to the root so that we don't keep having negative bids.
Ooh, ladies and gentlemen, on December 1st, we are giving away 5 $50 Amazon gift cards. If you want to be entered, all you have to do is leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app. Screenshot it, send it to myself, Alan, Amy, Tiff, Natalie. And that way we know who you are. And December 1st, we'll pick 5 winners. We'll ship it off, and you can do whatever you choose to do with it. We appreciate you so very much. And as always, we do not have fans. We have family. We will see you at the next level.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you so much for coming. Reach out anytime.